All right, welcome back, and this is video number 90. It's now 12 November, and we're going to get back into this Albert Osborne doc. And like I said, the fascinating thing about Albert Osborne is his connections to Wayne Williams and right-wing organizations. He was all, obviously involved somehow. Now, whether he knew that the President of the United States was going to get assassinated, I don't know. And it would make sense that he wouldn't know that the President was going to get assassinated. The only clue, though, that gives it away that he knew the President was going to be assassinated was the Grimsley call. Okay? So this guy is running around Texas. He's going into Mexico on the same bus, sitting next to Oswald. He's going back and forth between New Orleans and Tennessee and Texas and Mexico. And he's got the perfect cover, okay, for a CIA asset. Not a CIA-trained agent, but he's an old man. He's a minister. No one's going to give him a second look. So he could travel back and forth into Mexico, taking messages, taking money, making observations, meeting with people, taking back information they give him or whatever, photos, whatever. He's a fantastic cutout courier, all-around asset that the CIA, the FBI would definitely use. He's like the Morn Shield, okay? He's not a CIA-trained agent or an FBI-trained agent, but, he's a mercenary. They give him money, say, go do this, go do that, watch after Oswald, get him into Mexico City, show him where to go, because this guy's an idiot, he doesn't know what to do. And maybe at the time, he doesn't know that he's setting up Oswald to kill the president. Maybe he knows there's an assassination attempt, but he doesn't know that Oswald is the patsy. Okay? I'd say, though, after he leaves Mexico, he knows something's up, because immediately, like the day after he leaves Mexico City, he goes to New Orleans, goes straight to the Canadian Embassy, and renews his passport. So he's going to get out of the country, and then when the assassination comes, he's visiting his brother and sister who he hasn't seen for 20, 30 years, just to be out of the country. But his curious part gets to him, and he calls the newspaper and says, make sure you watch the news from Dallas of what's going on. So I find that very, very interesting. Another thing about people like this is that, like Osborne, like this French guy, Gonault, who stood in line with Oswald to help him get his visa, like, Clay Shaw, they were all, mercenary assets. They worked for money. They did certain jobs, maybe for patriotism, but mostly for money. And again, just because they're doing these things that end up helping the president get killed and framing Oswald doesn't mean that they all were in on the plot to kill the president or to frame Oswald. Because that's the problem that people don't understand, is there actually 2 or 3 things going on here. Okay? We have the assassination plans for the president. And they involve many patsies. Okay? I'm sure there was a guy in Florida for the Miami or the Tampa hit or attempt. And I'm sure this guy in Chicago, who's also a Marine with mental illness, was part of it, but didn't know. He was their designated patsy for the area. If Kennedy had gone to California, there probably would be, a Sirhan type person there, because with these patsies, it just doesn't involve just the president, and these patsies aren't just involved in focusing on killing the president. They're doing other things. They have other assignments. So what you do is you're looking for someone in your organization that you can pin the assassination on, okay? And you may have multiple targets depending on where the president goes. And you see how everything just kicks into gear as soon as they announce that the president is coming to Texas, and he's going to go through Houston, he's going to go through Dallas, he's going to go to Fort Worth and Austin and San Antonio, all these places. Then, boom, Oswald is run down to the Mexican consulate to get the visa to get into Mexico, and then Oswald is on his, sending, all of a sudden Ruth Payne, she chimes in right at the same time. She just happens to be swinging back from Washington, D.C. after going to see Martin Luther King speak there, She just happens to be swinging through and then calls and calls the Oswalds and say, hey, I can pick you up. And I mean, how would she have known? Okay, that's the thing. Is she goes all the way to Washington to see Martin Luther King speak in August, and how would she have known? And to see relatives, I believe. And how would she have known that if she swung back through New Orleans, that Marina would want to be heading back to Dallas, okay, from New Orleans? Oswald would be leaving New Orleans and going to, not even knowing that he has a job in Dallas. So instead of staying in New Orleans, if Oswald had stayed in New Orleans, none of this would have happened. But it all signals to some kind of plan that's fluid, and then it's changed around as information comes in. So when they find out certain information, then certain assets are activated, and then certain plans are put into motion. You have, in the military, we would always practice for different scenarios. It was plan A, plan B, plan C. And if they did this, we would do that. And if they went here, we would go there. And if, all these kinds of scenarios you would practice. So you knew immediately, because that's the thing when you're dealing with, your target. You can't control them. All you can do is react to what they do. So you have multiple scenarios set up and standby plans with assets ready, just in case they go left, they go right, they go straight, they go backwards, whatever. When it got down to August, they were basically pushing for Oswald to be the patsy, and for it all happened in Texas. They wanted to get it away from New Orleans. Florida wasn't going to work out, so they wanted it all to happen in Texas. Now, again, if you listen to the Warren Commission logic, this whole scenario of Oswald going to, Mexico City to get a Cuban visa, to get into Cuba with a transit visa so he could get back to Russia, so then he could come around and come back to the United States and kill the president. Doesn't make any sense. And then they try to dangle that thing out there that he was doing a practice dry run, okay, of obtaining a visa, so when he killed the president, he could escape to Mexico City and then escape to Cuba as a Cuban hero. Well, that's just bullshit, because they would have stopped him at the border. The Mexican police would have arrested him. There's no way he would have been allowed to fly out of out of Mexico City. That's just insanity. So they set it up as a possibility. Well, yeah, of course he's trying to get into the Cuban embassy because he's a communist, okay? But in reality, when you look at it in realistic terms, it doesn't make any fucking sense. And it never would work. And it's just an unbelievable scenario. But they lay it out there where people don't question things and they just go along with it. And Albert Osborne is essentially one of these low-level assets that they're using. And again, the whole story with Albert Osborne and then this Ganault guy that helped him get the visa in New Orleans, and then with Clay Shaw, that right there, they all three had connections with intelligence services, okay, in the government. So that right there tells you that there are rogue elements of the government that are plotting to kill Kennedy, and they're using their furthest away assets that they can get from themselves and the agency to set up the whole thing. They have a plan, and now they're trying to use their assets to steer Oswald into the right position, okay? And there's another story I heard also. They got Oswald running around applying for jobs, okay? And then he gets this job at the Texas School Book Depository. But the day before, or maybe 2 days before he got the job at the Texas School Book Depository, he was sent by the Texas Employment Commission to Love Field to get a job paying like 4 times as much, loading baggage or something like that on airplanes. And he was offered the job, okay? But he declined the job, okay? And the question you have to ask yourself is, why would Oswald decline a job making 4 times as much money, okay? And he was told to take the job at the Texas School Book Depository. Now, there were some characters there, like this Hispanic guy that was head of some kind of union, was trying to unionize the book people there. And maybe Oswald was told that this guy had links to communism, so we want you to work there, keep your ears and eyes open, and then report back what you find, and we'll make up the difference with the money, okay? So he's taking a job for less money, but he's doing his patriotic duty. So that would be a good reason. But he doesn't know that he's being set up, okay? You have to get Oswald into the Texas School Book Depository, okay, making less money. The only way to do that is some kind of patriotic appeal, undercover something. That's the only way to do it, okay? And again, people are going to say, well, there's no way Oswald was an agent of the United States Intelligence Services. He was a loser. He couldn't take care of his family and all these kinds of things. And that's essentially, or you'll hear other ones like Nagel, about Nagel and all these other people. They were nuts. They were alcoholics. They had tempers. They were in the psych wards and stuff like that. And that's essentially exactly the type of assets that you would use, okay? Deniable assets, people that no one would take serious, okay? People a little on the edge, in financial straits, a little psychologically damaged, that no one would take serious as an agent in the CIA or the FBI. But they're perfect for assets because they're controllable and they're also deniable. Okay, like even in Bowen's testimony to the FBI, you can tell he's a little out there. I mean, Osborne, he's a little out there. Okay, and you're also going to want to use criminals. You're going to want to use people that can be controlled. If they have a criminal record, the FBI is going to use them as an asset because the promise that if you do this job, you become one of our informants and snitch on this guy, will put in a good word with the judge and lower your sentence. So there's all these things of control that, dirty them as legitimate sources when they come forward and say, yeah, I did this, I did that for the CIA, I did this for the FBI. But they're perfect when you look at the qualifications as an asset is someone that's controllable. Either the psychological problems, either they got criminal records, alcohol problems, all these kinds of things. Even with Oswald, let's just say Oswald was kind of leaning toward communism or socialism. Maybe he was an idealist looking for certain things. Well, the FBI comes along and says, look, we know you're not a communist. We know you're a socialist or whatever. And we know you have financial problems. And your discharge is been changed. So what we'll do is we'll give you a little extra money every month. We want you to watch these people for us, okay? And then we're going to work on getting your discharge changed. We're going to try to help you with your wife's visa and all these kinds of things. They make him these promises, okay? Because they're controllable. Same thing with Albert Osborne. He's not some trained FBI or CIA agent. He's a flawed individual that they're using. And the great thing is, he's so deep of an asset that not even the FBI knows that he is probably either working for them, informing for them, and their intelligence anti-communist service, or working for the CIA or some kind of military intelligence. That's how deep he is. You see, people think that, a lot of these government agencies, they think of it's like, you walk into a gymnasium and all the agents are visible on the floor in the stands there. And that's not the way it is. There are different compartments, that don't trust each other, that don't share files, that one, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And a lot of times that's on purpose, okay, to weed out Russian assets, Chinese assets, because if they know everything, like, what was that FBI agent who knew all our agents in Russia, then one bad apple can kill them all off, and that's exactly what happened. Anyways, let's get back into this. I've been talking way too much. This is Albert Osborne, and this is another. See, we're at March here. March 1964. The assassination was 4 months before. So 4 months into it, they're still spending time and money trying to figure out who the hell this guy is. And see, that tells you he's a very, very deep asset, okay, that not even the FBI knows he's one of theirs. All right. So it says Albert Osborne, whose permanent address is 920 Salinas, Box 308, Laredo, Texas, was interviewed at his temporary place of residence at the Central YMCA, Nashville, Tennessee, where he is registered under the name of John Bowen. You see, he's living in. They interviewed him in Alabama. He was in Atlanta. He was in Tennessee. Now he's in Nashville. They had him down in New Orleans, and now they have him in Texas. He's all over the place. Okay. At the outset of the interview, Osborne denied his true identity and claimed his name was John Bowen. However, he later admitted that his correct name is Albert Osborne, and he furnished the following background information concerning himself. Osborne indicated that he was born November 12, 1888, at Grimsby, England, to James Osborne and Emily Cole Osborne. Osborne, William Osborne, deceased, and Frank something, deceased. He identified his sisters as Emily Featherstone, Grimsby, England; Florrie Bond, London, England; Rosetta Gill, Lincolnshire, England; and Ada Amos, Gary, Indiana. He stated that he was educated at St. James Academy at Grimsby, England, until the 8th grade. Osborne stated that he joined the British Army in 1908, served in India, Arabia, and Bermuda. Now, see, there's another thing right there. So, if you're born in 1888 and you joined the military in 1908, that means you're 30 years old. That's not really, really old, but that, that's pushing it. Serving the British Army in 1914 in Bermuda, and thereafter came directly to the United States and proceeded to Washington, D.C., where he obtained employment in several grocery stores under his correct name, Albert Osborne. While in Washington, D.C., he took a correspondence course in religion from the University of Chicago. Thereafter, he went to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where he attended the Philadelphia Bible College for approximately 1 year, while living and working as a janitor at the YMCA. In 1916, he proceeded to Canada, where he joined the Canadian Army as Osborne and remained in the Canadian Army until his cessation of hostilities in World War I. Thereafter, he returned to, Washington, D.C., where he met a Syrian whose name he does not recall, and went into the rug cleaning business with this individual. Osborne indicated that the rug cleaning business was of an itinerant nature, and he and the Syrian traveled throughout the United States in this venture. During this period, and at the suggestion of the Syrian, he adopted the name John Bowen in order to obtain more Americanized name for the purpose of eventually obtaining American citizenship and an American passport. Now that's interesting because earlier he says that, and other witnesses say, that Bowen is a real person who got into the missionary business just like Osborne, and met Osborne along the same circuit, missionary circuit, and that Bowen died and all this money was coming in for his missionary work, and so Osborne took over Bowen's identity to keep getting that money. And but eventually, though, Bowen is banned from coming into Mexico. So when he goes into Mexico, he has to use his name Osborne. But when he travels around Mexico and other places, he uses the name Bowen. Again, the way you can tell someone's lying is if you have different agents at different locations at different times, ask him the same questions, and then his story changes all the time, then you know he's lying, okay? But eventually you can put things together, what really happened, okay, by the consistency of other individuals and the story that he's not lying about. All right. He indicated, however, that he did not thereafter take any steps to obtain American citizenship or to obtain an American passport. He stated that he took no steps to have his name changed legally, but merely adopted the name Bowen. Now, see, that's really interesting too, because the CIA would want, or they don't have the CIA at that time, they do have an intelligence service that they're running through the State Department. So our intelligence services is going to use assets, okay, of a foreign nature, non-Americans, because Americans are going to, you're flashing an American passport, you're going to be watched more closely, okay? So that's why they're using other people to gather intelligence information for them that aren't Americans. I had a friend of mine I met who's Swedish, and he was in what would be the equivalent of the Swedish Navy SEALs. It was like the UDT or the Underwater Guard or something like that. And his commander sent him to Washington. He was sitting in the Pentagon, and this general came in and pointed at him and said, you're the one. And instantly, he became part of the Navy SEALs. He didn't have to go through, SEAL training or anything like that. He was an attachment to the Navy SEALs. I think they even gave him American identity or whatever, passport. And for 20-something years, he was attached to Navy SEALs, even though he never went through Navy SEAL school. Okay? And he said there were many other people like that. There were some Germans, there were some Brits, and even some French. And they used them because of the language skill, but also the point of deniability. They could go into other countries without a U.S. passport, and no one would think anything different of them. Okay? And boom, they have a Navy SEAL military asset that's not American. They even have foreign accents. Okay? So the bad thing about, Americans, when you send Americans into other countries, you have people walking around like this and, hey, how's it going? Yeah, or can you show us where your nuclear assets are at, And they obviously come across as Americans, even if they speak the language. If they're speaking Arabic, they're speaking Arabic with an American accent, or Persian or Farsi with an American accent, or Swedish or German with an American accent. Okay? So that's a problem. So if you can use other people, I'm sure Albert Osborne had a British accent, or maybe a Canadian type of accent. They're going to throw up less red flags when you're sending them around. You'll see he goes to Iceland, he went to Spain, Portugal, Germany, all these different places. And that's just basically them come up to him and say, hey, it's basically they're going to pay you per assignment. Okay? Per diem and an upfront fee, whatever. And here's $1,000. Here's $2,000. You get another $2,000 when the mission's complete and you get back and give us what we want. Go take pictures of whatever in some other country. That's just the way it works. He stated that he took, let's see, what else we have here. After leaving the rug cleaning business, he worked several years as an itinerant gardener, primarily in the states of Virginia and North Carolina. In 1928, he went to Knoxville, Tennessee, where he became affiliated with the YMCA in the city in the boys' work, and indicated that he organized the organization which subsequently became known as the Boys Club of America. Now you remember there's that story about the guest book in Knoxville, Tennessee that was listed as what was it? Lee Oswald signed in at the guest book at the some kind of atomic museum or something like that they have there. And it was, the listing was like somewhere around October, like right after Mexico City. It was listed that this guy visited and wrote it down. And it's not like, the assassination happened and some stupid teenager writes down, Lee Oswald in the guest book the day after the assassination. That didn't happen. It happened a month and a half before. Okay? And just, again, makes you wonder, did Oswald, after leaving Mexico City, go with Osborne to New Orleans, back to New Orleans, and then go on to Knoxville, and then go back to Dallas? Who knows? But I find that very interesting. All right. And again, I find it interesting that the FBI spends months and months and months using numerous assets of agents, hundreds of thousands of dollars in expenses, because you got gas, you got salary, you got hotel rooms, chasing this guy down and interviewing him. The FBI definitely was interested in him, okay? Not only was that interesting, but I also find it interesting that the Warren Commission found it interesting enough to put into the Warren Commission volumes, okay? So here's the thing. There were FBI agents interviewing people. There were police interviewing people. There were sheriffs interviewing people. And that all, not all of it, made it to the investigators for the Warren Commission. And then those investigators, let's just say that they got 100 reports. Maybe they followed up on 75 or 50 of them, okay, and brought those people in to be interviewed, okay? And out of those 50 people that were interviewed, maybe 25 of them they include in the Warren report. See, it's a filtering process, because what they're looking for is not the truth, not all the aspects of the case and the different rabbit holes it may go down. They're looking for just specific things that can frame it all on Oswald as the lone killer to satisfy the American public. So that's what they're doing. But this right here doesn't do that. And you have to wonder why some attorney who's investigating this would include this or encourage the Warren Commission to include this in their final report. Basically, it's saying that, yeah, we know there was a conspiracy, but we're going to just say that, well, like even Ford said, look, I'm not saying there wasn't a conspiracy. This is essentially what Ford says. He says, I'm not saying there wasn't a conspiracy, but we never found any evidence, okay, that proved it was anyone else but Oswald. Conclusively, is what he says. So basically they say, well, we found evidence it was Oswald, but we didn't find anything that was conclusive. There were others involved in the conspiracy with Oswald. Okay? So essentially he's saying that we're not saying there wasn't a conspiracy, we just didn't have any evidence that we came across saying that it was a conspiracy. But here they have an obvious conspirator, along with Galt and Shaw, and they never include it. Why is Shaw never included in the Warren Commission? Why is, Bannister not included? Ferry not included? They got this guy they're spending 50 pages on, and they never mention that Oswald was working with Ferry and Shaw in Bannister's office. Not once. But everybody knew it. This is why Garrison went after Shaw. Okay? Because it was obvious from day one there was connection there. But anyway, they waste time with this, and then at the very end, boom, in April it's dropped. Because again, we can't have doors opening that prove Oswald wasn't alone in the conspiracy. Alright, so we'll keep going. Osborne stated that he first visited Mexico in 1939 and as a tourist, and became interested in missionary work and has been in and out of Mexico numerous times since. He indicated that for the past 20 years, he has maintained occasional residences and permanent mailing addresses at 920 Salinas, Box 308, Laredo, Texas. So let's take a look at that. Hold on one second. Yeah, right there. That's the place that he had been living. 920 Salinas, right there. You see, 920. It was basically just a hotel. In this connection, Osborne denied that he had ever received correspondence from relatives addressed as Albert Osborne, care of John Bowen. He said he was well known at Laredo, Texas as John Bowen and was a member of the First Baptist Church in that city. Osborne stated that he had gotten into trouble in Mexico in about 1958 when the Mexican authorities were conducting sort of a census in order to identify Americans residing in Mexico. He stated that when he was questioned by Mexican authorities, he was required to produce identification documents, and only documents he had were his birth certificate and a Canadian Army enlistment paper in the name of Albert Osborne, which he produced, stating that this mixed my name up with the people in Osaka, and indicated that he was known in Mexico by the names of Osborne and Bowen. He indicated that he used the name John Bowen in the United States since about 1916, except when he applied for and received a Canadian passport in New Orleans on October 10, 1963. So you see that right there? So right after he leaves Mexico City, he goes straight to New Orleans. But he goes someplace else because he leaves around the 2nd or the 3rd of October, and then he ends up in New Orleans on the 10th of October and reapplies for a passport. Now, he hadn't had a passport in like over 10 years, but all of a sudden, after his Mexico City travels with Oswald, right before, a month and a half before the assassination, he has to get a passport, and then he goes immediately, makes sure that he arrives in Grimsley before the assassination. So what that tells you is you know people know certain things by their actions. Okay? If someone kills somebody and then they show up at the Home Depot and they buy a shovel and they buy lime or whatever and they buy a hacksaw and a hatchet, they're probably going to go bury the guy, chop him up and bury him in a hole someplace. So this is how we know people are involved in certain things, is because of their actions either before the event or following the event. Okay? So if you know what's happened, and then you know who you have as a suspect, you look at their actions, phone calls, text messages, emails, Google searches, and what they do nowadays, before the event and after the event. Okay? Like this guy in Long Island, this killer, Guglio Beach, whatever. He, after every murder, and he would leave the bodies out there, he would monitor the news by Googling about the murders, if any bodies had been found. And some weren't found for years, but he kept monitoring them until they were found. So that right there shows you, if they looked at my Google searches, they wouldn't see me looking up about bodies found in Guglio Beach. Only he was doing that. So if they have him as a suspect, that's probably a good indication that he was the murderer. And besides that, they have the DNA matching him. All right. We'll keep going here. It says, using the above-mentioned Osborne identification documents, he indicated that after obtaining the passport, he visited his sisters and brothers in England and a Baptist church in Madrid on a 21-day trip ending in New York on December 5th. You see how he comes back after the assassination. Good 2 weeks. Okay? He traveled to Europe and returned to the United States as a passenger on Icelandic Airlines. Osborne was questioned concerning his missionary work in Mexico. He indicated that he had visited various evangelical churches in Mexico City and other places in Mexico, providing books and financial assistance in these churches. He was questioned concerning the sources of funds to provide the financial assistance and books, and stated that these funds came from various independent Baptist churches and members of the Baptist churches that with whom he was in contact. You see, it's all very loose. He didn't have to keep records back then. You know, expense reports, income reports, nothing like that. And, you know, all you have to do is just get a few, you know, boxes of books and boxes of food together, go across the border and say, hey, I'm a missionary, drop it off at some church, and then the rest of your time is free to do your other things. Whatever the government or whoever you're working for, your paymaster, is paying you to do. So it gives you a lot of spare free time. It's not like he's going down there and working, you know, building a bridge or something like that. So it's a perfect cover. And, you know, this is why, especially in the Soviet Union and China, they were always very, very suspicious of missionaries. Okay? Because, and they kept a close eye on them, because they knew that the CIA was using missionaries around the world to do their work for them. You know, so you're not going to have some guy who's going to go to college, go to seminary, you know, get his seminary degree, and then he's going to go to the CIA training and go down to the farm and train there, and then they're going to send him out as an asset after 2-3 years of CIA training. What they're going to do is they're going to use him on an as per mission basis. Give him a little extra funding to his missionary, his church, whatever. And that way there seems to be no connection. He's just some missionary in South America, whatever. You know, and meanwhile he's reading the newspapers, he's taking pictures, he's keeping track whether that dictator is going to survive a communist revolution or whatever is going on. Perfect contact. All right. He also indicated Leonard Ingram, who operates a publishing house of religious material in Mexico City, could provide information concerning his work in a missionary in Mexico. And again, you know, if you've got a guy that you go and buy books from, he doesn't know what you're doing 24 hours a day. So you could swing through, as you're taking pictures of the Russian embassy, to go by his publishing house and pick up some books. It's a perfect cover. Okay? All right. And again, you think of it this way. If you've got a Russian diplomat or a Cuban diplomat or a Cuban asset that you want followed, and pictures of his house and his car and his girlfriend and his dog and all this and his kids at school, you're not going to use a police trained team. You're going to use a missionary. Go by, snap a picture, act like a tourist, all this kinds of stuff. It's a perfect cover. No one's going to look at an old man with a priest collar or whatever, carrying a Bible, snapping tourist photos on the streets of Mexico City. Just not going to happen. Anyway, He indicated he was well known to the Bible Society, known as the Mexicana Bible Society in Mexico City. Regarding churches from which he received financial support, he indicated the First Baptist Church of Roanoke, Virginia, Isabel Baptist Church, Layton, Alabama, and several other churches in the area, as well as some churches in Florida. Now again, these churches would have no idea that he's a CIA or intelligence asset. All they know is he's taking food, he's taking money, he's taking books down to their missionary projects in Mexico, and that's all they know. And he's sending back photos and postcards and all kinds of stuff. They're not watching him 24 hours a day. So again, it's another perfect cover. He indicated that Carl Kirby, who is the postmaster in Layton, Alabama, was a person whom he rendered considerable financial assistance to him. Osborne emphasized that he did not solicit these funds, that these churches and individuals knew of his work and voluntarily sent contributions from time to time. Besides the money he was taking under the name of Osborne. Of Bowen. All right. Osborne was specifically questioned concerning specific activities since June 1962. In this connection, he stated that since the time he has been traveling around considerably, when questioned for specific places he had been in his activities, he indicated he spent some time in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and other Louisiana towns and cities looking for old, rare books which he collected and was able to sell for profit. And of course, there's nothing stopping him from making a little extra money on the side also. He indicated that he stayed in rooming houses and cheap hotels, none of which he was able to identify. He was questioned concerning his contacts during that period, but was unable to provide specifics. Osborne was questioned specifically concerning his trip to Mexico City on September 26, 27, 1963. That's exactly when Oswald was in Mexico City. Osborne indicated that he was a passenger on a Red Arrow bus line from Laredo to Mexico City on September 25th, 1963. When reminded that he previously furnished bus ticket stubs of the Red Arrow bus lines indicating that he journeyed to Mexico City on the 26th, Osborne indicated that it was possible that the date of the beginning of his journey was September 26th, but that was his first recollection, that he left on September 25th, 1962. He maintained that on the trip to Mexico City, there was no other English-speaking people who were fellow passengers, specifically denied that Lee Oswald, whose picture he had viewed on several occasions, was a fellow passenger, even though they have numerous other people saying they saw him with Oswald. He stated that this person boarded the bus on the Mexico side of Laredo. He said this person was wearing khaki pants, colored shirt, no hat, and indicated this person tended to be bald-headed and had a something shallow complexion. He got off the bus at the first coffee break at Sabino Elidgo. His seatmate re-entered the bus after the coffee break, but proceeded to the rear of the bus where he slept. Osborne indicated that the only conversation he had with the person on the bus was the elderly Mexican woman who was holding a young baby. All right. Okay, so All right, so we'll go to 23. I'm going to go ahead and stop here, and we'll pick this up next time. All right, so this is the Brazilian embassy. It's just right up the road from the Russian embassy, which is just down that way right there. But you can see Brazil, they have essentially no enemies in Canada. You see, there's hardly even a fence there. You see? There's absolutely no security whatsoever. This is probably, you know, this is probably the ambassador's residence right there. But you can tell the level of paranoia and danger that somebody's in by their security they set up at their embassies. And basically Brazil has no enemies. You know, Brazil's not bombing anybody. Nobody's trying to bomb Brazil. So this is how, you know, they're set up. But anyway, so we'll end here, and we'll pick up next time. All right, take care.